Welcome to Share the Mic. This is a time for conversation between Southern black and white friends where we get to ask each other questions that we hope will help our communities better understand perspectives, create empathy for people of different colors, and be one more step towards eliminating racism. My guest today is Darlene Wilson, and you will soon hear about her power-packed resume. Darlene is the founder and managing principal of Relay Accounting Management. She's director of Classic Business Connect and principal of Dog Trot Business Consulting Group. Darlene received her Bachelor of Science in Accounting from the University of Montevallo. This year, she was named one of Birmingham's most influential executives, the Power 60, and in 2019 was honored to be named one of the top 100 influential executives of finance nationally. Her accounting firm was also nominated for ICIC's 2019 Inner City 100 Awards. Darlene is the mother of one son, Christian, a senior at MSU in Denver, studying accounting. As Darlene says it best, this is by far her most challenging and yet greatest accomplishment in life. And me, also being a mother of one, I wholeheartedly agree. She enjoys cooking, wine tasting, traveling the world, flower vegetable gardening, and reading. She simply loves life and is certainly living it out to its fullest. Welcome, Darlene.
Thank you for having me, Libby.
You are most welcome. I have to first ask you what Dog Trot Business Consulting is and where in the world does that name derive from?
So Dog Trot is a very interesting term, I know. But Dog Trot is actually a home, and it is a home that at one time, there's no power to those homes. There's a breezeway that is used by the family, but it's equal on each side. So the kitchen and bathrooms are on one side of the home, all of the bedrooms are on the other side of the home, and the family would meet in the breezeway. You meet in the breezeway for dinner, you meet in the breezeway for breakfast, lunch, just a good cup of coffee and conversation. So we say that that's what we do at Dog Trot. We are a group of consultants that meet in the middle. So our talents are equally as important to the success of the consulting group, but we meet in the middle to collaborate. And that's where we get Dog Trot from.
That's great. Love that. So, Darlene, we met through serving on the Rev Birmingham board. You have vast community involvement and serve on several boards and in community leadership positions, including Legacy Prep Charter School, Kiwanis Club, the Well House, Regions Bank, the Birmingham Airport Authority Board, and the Small Business Council of Birmingham. There are so many, I don't know that I even got them all from your resume. But thank you first for the service.
Absolutely. My pleasure to serve.
So you are a board leader and serve in various capacities on several boards, including being the former chairman of the Board of Rev Birmingham. What was it like for you to be a black board chairman of a mostly white board? And how did you adjust your style, if at all, to serve in this leadership position?
So I think that that's a very interesting question, and thank you for that question. So my leadership at Rev taught me a lot. And what it taught me most was I didn't have to adjust my style. That I could walk into this boardroom and I could lead this group simply by being just me and who I am. But I lead from the perspective of really getting to know my board members. So I make an assessment first. Who's on the board? Who's pushing? Who's pulling? Who's advocating for this board? And kind of what do they really want to see in terms of the advancement and growth of the organizations? So your board, as a board leader, your board is there to work collectively and collaborate together. I'm not there to tell them what to do. I'm there to listen to them and help them navigate what needs to be done so that the organization can be successful. So I have had amazing people on boards to work with. It doesn't matter the size of the board. I like boards that are filled with different personalities, different types of people, different classes of work. It's a pleasure to serve and lead. And if you lead authentically, you don't have to change your style because of the color of your skin or your gender.
What a great answer. And I love it that you say you serve. You know, in a leadership position, you're serving.
Absolutely.
So good.
So, I have a question for you, Libby. I often get questions, who is she? What makes her qualified for this position? As insulting as those questions are to a highly accomplished, capable, and educated person with a proven track record to lead and sustain, I do understand why people ask those questions. So when you walk into a room, Libby, and see a Black person leading what has always been perceived as a predominantly white boardroom, what are your immediate thoughts? And if you have reservations about our leadership, please share your thoughts. And I want you to speak to this from the perspective of questioning our qualifications, from your personal biases, or even other conversations you hear from your peers and colleagues.
First off, Darlene, you broke all my rules. I think you asked 5 questions there, but you know, that's okay. If we can't answer them all today, we'll answer the rest over a glass of wine in the very near future. But it is interesting that you ask those questions because my immediate thoughts are not anywhere close to reservations. My first thought is that I would like one day to be able to walk into a room, a boardroom, and not notice at all that the leader is a person of color, but just a person. I read a great book recently called One Blood that I really take to heart. We are not of different races. We are all the human race, was the direct quote from Pastor Mark Perkins. And we only have a difference of skin pigmentation. But for now, I'm more along the lines of, wow, this is great. We have diversity at a senior level. So those are the thoughts that are running through my head. Unfortunately, that's still rare, and it shouldn't be. But for me, it's refreshing as I am an advocate for people of color in positions of authority. So I love being in situations where I'm able to participate with Blacks and Asians and Hispanics on boards like I have with you at Rev Birmingham. So unfortunately, I think today people still, well, I guess maybe they're careful. They're more careful. So is that a good thing? We'll talk about that in a minute. But I think there's still a hidden bias, and that's the unfortunate thing. But I believe we are making gains. Surely different cultures can clash at this level. But you ask about things I've noticed or seen. I've heard in the past, maybe it might revolve around someone's name. Interesting, different name, being unusual, or the way that they talk is not as proper, or it's different. So they are not taken as seriously, and that's obvious, or their qualifications could be questioned. So I believe these cultural differences are how some white business people in board positions might immediately disqualify people. And that is clearly a form of oppression, and that needs to change. So if, just by example, if someone is of white European descent, say French, and has a name like Francois, well, that's not a very American name, Francois, and talks with a strong French accent, it's highly unlikely that they would experience that same bias. But here, we're all reared in different environments, yet sometimes color sets the tone for questions about abilities, education, and experience. And that's wrong. So, Darlene, that's one of the reasons we're having this conversation today. We want people to hear us having this discussion about real issues and how these biases hold people of color back.
Really good response. And I really like that you're reading, right? So reading is so critical sometimes, to kind of understanding what we believe to be the unknown, right? And so I too read because they're all forms of education and ways to understand other cultures and really get to hear those thoughts expressed, and you can explore them independently, which just kind of gives you a little bit more ammunition, right, to get out there and continue to have these tough conversations that we're having today. So I love that, Libby.
We have to be trained to have these conversations, and reading education is the fastest way to get there.
It is.
Okay, so let's explore further on this topic. Along those same lines, what are the challenges African Americans face in assuming these types of leadership roles? What needs could be addressed to further their roles and make them more equitable?
So I want to, go back to some comments that you made and related to maybe some biases on dialect and how that could be some limitations or name. It could be limitations to a person's advancement in corporate or even in board positions, because you're not quite sure that they are qualified just based on the name that they have or the English that they speak. Mm-hmm. So I quite often question that from the perspective of what makes one more right than the other. So I'm going to go and take it a little bit further, because I want to talk a little bit about a lot of what I called policy handbooks from back in the day, right? Even things that to me were discriminated against women, really didn't discriminate just against people because of color, but there were some things that was really for women.
Yes.
When I started my career in the early 90s, in our handbook, they still said women had to wear dresses, mm-hmm. closed-toe shoes,
maybe stockings too.
Stockings too, right? And so you think, fast forward here to 2020, every woman today is going to say, that is very discriminatory, mm-hmm. and how dare you tell me I can't wear pants, right? I can wear pants. So I think it's the same feeling. So I guess what I'm saying is we're still here, though, with judging people of color and other nationalities by things such as the way they speak, the hair that they wear, the colors, the vibrancy sometimes from a lot of cultures that you get in the clothes that they wear, which speaks so directly to who they are. But because it doesn't fit in that box that someone somewhere said was right, and I think it was men.
I think you're right.
Okay, yeah. So we're going to blame it on men. That we, so with that being said, it has created limitations for us to advance in corporate America and for us to advance on boards in those sorts of be in those sorts of leadership positions. It's really an unfair way for us to approach diversity and inclusion that is so necessary. I always say if you continue to walk in a boardroom and everybody looks the same, you've walked into a boardroom that has a single voice. And it is not until we have made a conscious decision that it is through diversity and inclusion and all people being at the table, regardless of how they wear their hair, regardless of the name that they have and how they complete their sentences, we need all of those voices in the room, because it's only through that collaboration that we continue to be able to diversify and understand the people that we're going to work with, lead with, and continue to grow with within our entities. And all people are here to be who they are and not to check any one person's boxes to say, I can't advance, or you're going to limit me from advancing because there's somebody who says the way I speak and the name that I've been given is not the name that's acceptable. And who defines that? And who will continue to determine that for us as people?
It's all so boring.
It's boring. Yeah.
What the richness that's out there that could be gained through having people of different color, of vibrant colors in dress, in wonderful names, cultural names from different culture, just it's just, again, it brings a richness in culture to a board or to a company. And so those that aren't tapping into that are just so missing out.
Yeah, and it's a very shallow, to me, perspective for people to have. And I always continue to feel like when people go down that road, that's just from fear, sheer ignorance of getting to know people and getting to understand who you're working with and talking to. I read a post one day on social media from some social workers who work in underserved communities, and the discussion they were having was having difficulty pronouncing the children's names that they were working with, and how ridiculous it was for these children to be named that. And these are the people who are serving, supposed to be serving the underserved.
Maybe shouldn't be.
And maybe they shouldn't be, right? And those are the biases, right, that we continue to talk about. Those are the things that continue to limit us and our growth. And we have to have these conversations so we can recognize those inner biases that really are limiting our individual growth.
Well said. So, Darlene, many people in business are uncomfortable talking about racial issues. Do you think we should talk openly about the racial divide? And if so, what are some guidelines that white business leaders should better understand in order to have open dialogue and affect change?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes to that. We have to have these tough conversations. And we have to stop thinking that these tough conversations are always going to result in some deep-rooted conflict. And it doesn't. Tough conversations are healthy for us. And let me tell you, I think that we missed a lot of opportunities sometimes in having these tough conversations, because a lot of our generation, especially those in the 60s and the 70s, during the civil rights era, when especially those that stood on the right side of the fence, this has been a tough conversation for them to have, because they already grew up in families where this maybe was a topic of discussion that was very painful for them. They didn't understand why it was happening, and all they knew was they would not be like that, right? They would not be that type of person. But I think not having those conversations over the years has really hurt us, because we took a matter that was so important to our community that we could have really made a strong movement on in the 60s and 70s if we had continued the tough conversations. It wasn't just enough to not have a black water faucet and a white water faucet and black people, integrating schools and those sorts of things. The conversation of how do I get to know the person who has been oppressed needed to continue to happen. And we shied away from those conversations for many reasons, and maybe rightfully so, and maybe because corporate never created a culture for those conversations to continue and for those important conversations to be had by a myriad of staff, not just at the top, not just mid-level, but all team members being a part of groups where conversations like this can be safely had. They would not be, again, used against them in any sort of way, but a place where understanding continues to happen so that we can evolve collectively in our cultures. That's what we're trying to do. Aren't we trying not to be individual as much anymore? We're trying to collectively come together as a people, understand each other, understand each other's cultures. These cultures, people have some amazing things going on in their cultures. I mean, we can learn a lot from each other. Some great foods, some great music, some good dance moves, right? There's a lot that happens. And yet, what we learn primarily when we have these open conversations is that we're not that far apart. As much as we think that we're different, we're not. We just may go about it a little bit differently. But the end game for all of us is primarily the same. We just want to get along, all want to work hard, We want to take care of our families. We want to have equal access. And corporate has to allow that to happen even in the workplace, because who you are personally becomes a part of that workplace.
Yes, it does.
And a lot of people have talked about that, right? I can go home and I can be this way, but at work that I can't be this way because they may not quite accept me like this. And if they don't accept me like this, then I may not have a job. So if I don't talk like they talk, we mentioned that, right? Or if I don't wear my hair the way they want me to wear my hair, if I don't wear the clothes, I don't look the part that they think I should look for the job that I have, right? We have to have those conversations. Business leaders need to know that those conversations and those feelings are real to their employees and that they are doing everything that they can to not support any sort of discrimination in that way, and that they are advocating for all of their team, regardless of race, nationality, religion, however you want to box somebody in, handicaps, all types of things. We have to be a part of a collective society in a way where we give a voice to all of our people and let them know they matter.
So the uncomfortable conversations
have to happen, and they must continue. So everybody must be uncomfortable for a little while until we get comfortable. Because all should be comfortable, not just a few. Everyone should feel comfortable.
Yes.
So, Libby, you are a female executive leading a once all-white company that primarily targeted white people to sell and lease property. Although all women collectively have vastly been discriminated against, what can you say as a female leader is your direct contribution in your company to speak intentionally to inequities, diversity, and inclusion? And how do you help your underserved in your industry have a voice that matters? One more of it, Libby. And do you believe diversity and inclusion from the top matters in how a company can fully engage in the meaning of diversity and inclusion, and why an entity needs to have leadership that looks like their employees, clients, and customers?
And one of the things I love about Darlene the most is she shatters all the rules. So good. 5 questions again wrapped into one. Our company, Bear Properties, let me talk about that for a minute. It's a really good example of where diversity has been apparent since well before I joined. We have actually evolved for the better because of that diversity at the top, and many people in Birmingham don't know about that. Yes, we have a history of being primarily a white company in our industry, but our industry, commercial real estate, has been primarily white and, I might add, male-led, very much dominated by males. But our founding partners at Bear long ago diversified at the top, and they were really way ahead of their time. And they brought in female leadership, including our mutual friend, Jill Deere, who eventually became a principal at Bear. Others, including Susan Fitzgibbon and Jamie Watkins, were some of the first female CFOs in Birmingham. And David Fields, an African-American, was also on our executive leadership team and chief counsel of Bear. That was one of the things that actually attracted me to leave Chicago and come to work at Bear Properties. So leaving Chicago and coming to Alabama was the diversity at the top and their goal to have diversity. So at one point, our executive team consisted of 2 Jewish males, 1 African-American male, and 3 females. So we're still pretty unique with having co-presidents that are both female, and that is highly unusual for a commercial real estate company in the U.S. and especially in Alabama. It's also, I'll also add that Bear's leadership has not been a stranger in experiencing issues involving discrimination because of our makeup, whether it has to do with color, religion, sexual orientation, or gender. My co-president, Jamie Watkins, and I recognize that we have to constantly work to achieve diversity and inclusion in our company, and that it's important for the betterment of our culture. We know that we have to spend time, talent, and resources on the issue, or we could lose one of the things that has made us special. That is why we have a team that's dedicated to overcoming any potential discrimination issues in our company. We call this group IDEA, and it's an acronym for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Awareness. And I just love the way that sounds, IDEA. The purpose, really, this happened early this summer that we felt like we had to actually have this focus group. It was really to change the status quo within our own company, because you do get comfortable. People do. They get complacent unless they're just on their toes about this issue all the time. So we started having honest discussions as a group on diversity issues and how we could address those at every level of the company, really more to what you had said about hitting it at all levels. And so we've been attending webinars, reading books. We've had a lot of rich discussion. And then when we'd had some of these meetings, we set actionable goals that are measurable and that we are going to be held accountable to. So one of the first areas is how we're going to recruit new employees. And as an example, we're being very intentional about spreading our wings and our recruiting efforts to HBCUs. We're going to visit several historically Black colleges next year to present our company and the opportunities in commercial real estate. Probably many people at these HBCUs don't even know what we do or why that could be interesting. People outside of commercial real estate just don't understand what the shopping center business is about. So we've got to educate people on our industry if we're going to become more diverse. And in hopes that people of color will want to apply for these opportunities. They may not once they learn about us. And then we've got to make it very comfortable. I'm going to go back to the word comfortable for them to be in our company. So that's important. And then we've got to show them also that there are a lot of other positions besides leasing and sales. We have accounting, property management, legal. There are all other kinds of opportunities besides just being on the sales side of our business. So that's one of the things we're doing. We have many, many others, initiatives, but that's one that I'm very excited about, and I'm going to personally go and make some of those presentations at the HBCUs. Also, we're reading books, as we were talking about books, and books. How do we become educated? So 3, I've read. The Third Option I'm into right now, which I think is a great book. White Fragility is one that I've also read. One Blood I mentioned as well. So we've kind of divided up the whole big lineup of books, the bestsellers, and our whole team is reading those. So lots of things in the idea world. Again, we can talk about more over a glass of wine of those, but we're also interested in any ideas you might bring to the table, Darlene. So I've got another question for you. You have a son in college in Denver. Please tell us how you prepared him for being away from your protection and any ongoing fears or concerns you have for his well-being. What would you say to parents of white kids as to how they can better prepare and embrace students that are Black at college or in high school? In other words, what would you want them to know in order to have empathy for kids of color?
Oh, so Libby, that's a big question for me. Anything related directly to my son, that would say the number one reason I decided to have this Share the Mic time with you is because this is what gives me the greatest pain, is how the world is handling Black males, how we see Black men, how we perceive them. It's painful for me. It has caused me light years of age because of the pain, the anxiety as a mother of a Black son, and especially when he hit driving age. It was just a whole nother level for me. So I want to just take it back just a little bit further from a foundational perspective and why I knew that this was something I would stand on the right side of the fence for going forward, because I knew that it was important to me that my son enters a world as a young male professional with opportunities like any other peer, white, Asian, Jewish, or however you want to define yourself, that he too deserved the same opportunity. So years ago when my son started high school, I didn't realize that people even still use the N-word to the degree that they do. But from day one of entering high school, my son was called the N-word, and almost daily. And he struggled with that because you'd have to know a little bit about us to know it's not how he was raised. It's not what we talk about in our family. We don't discriminate against people because of race, gender, religions. We just simply don't. But there's a reason for that. It's because if you look at the canvas of my family, you would be like, who are these people? But I'm a product of a biracial mom. I have a black father. I mean, if you look at my family picture, we're every color in the rainbow. So to speak against anybody would be to talk about my own family. And we would never do that because we love each other. And we don't talk about one another. And we would never do or insult each other by calling them a name because of the color of their skin. So it was challenging for me to even understand how to help my son navigate such racist tones and attitudes that came not only from his peers, but even the adults in the high school. And so this has been my fight for a long time. And I don't intend to give up. I will not take my foot off of the gas until I know that there's a movement once and for all for equality for all, and especially for black men. Because it is painful to know that you have a child that is in a world where you don't believe that they are accepted, and that they have to guard themselves and navigate in a way just to protect themselves because of the color of their skin. So my son can't wear a hoodie. He can be cold like your son or anyone else's son. Have a hoodie on his head, but he can't. And he won't. And that's how he had to be raised. So a lot of what I found out and realized that children respond and behave and call these names in such a way because they were raised that way. This is what happens in their families. This is what they're hearing at home. This is what they're hearing from their grandparents. And they take what they learn at home into the streets, into the communities of their schools and their churches, and they use that against their own peers. And this has been a real problem for black males. And so I will tell you that my son moved to Denver for college, and the likelihood of him coming back to Alabama is slim to none. Not anytime soon, because he feels that he is somewhere now where he's accepted for the color of his skin, and he doesn't have to worry about what his hairstyle is. Can he wear his hoodie? Well, you're in Denver, it's freezing cold. So everybody's covered up, hoods on their heads and hats and gloves and noses covered. Yeah, so it's common for all people there. But it's just the level of comfort that he feels. He feels more free to be who he is. And he thought that it's been very unfair how he was treated throughout high school and the names he was called. And we just never could really pinpoint why he was their point of attack. Because again, I just didn't understand that was still happening in 2020. I didn't even think to prepare my son for any racist types of comments, how to defend himself, how to stand up for his color. I had to go out and ask other Black men, is this a real thing? Or is this just an isolated incident that my son is going through? He's in Catholic school, he's in a private institution, a Christian institution. And is this really a real thing, or is this an isolated incident? And come to find out, no, it's a real thing for Black men. It's a real thing. And it's carried on in their lives from a very young age, especially those once they begin to integrate into other schools with other races, and when they integrate into the workforce. And it is a real source and point of contention for our communities. So I still don't know that I've prepared him very well. I just pray that he is prepared and that he knows how to handle himself in a way that he can allow a world to see him really for the charismatic, intelligent, loving and caring man that he truly is. That if you get to know that side of him, he'll be your first hire. He'll be the friend you would want to have. And that's what we're all trying to really push for, and definitely push for in our communities, because we're not scared of our Black men. I'm not scared of a tall, 6'4", 300-pound Black man walking in the room. These are our fathers. These are our grandfathers. These are our brothers. These are our children. And with the same love and endearment in the hearts of all, we feel the same way about our children. We feel the same way. So give my son the same opportunity to grow up and be a part of a world that he really belongs in. He's not visiting. Mm-hmm. He belongs here. He is an American citizen, and he should be treated that way by all people.
Thanks for sharing that, Darlene. What a loss for Alabama.
Yeah.
That he may not come back. Unlikely that he'll come back. And for you, it's exhausting having raised him.
It's exhausting.
I mean, just having to experience that for every mother.
It's painful. It's it's been heartbreaking at times. Yeah. A lot of crying nights because you don't know how to fix something that is in your heart so broken. I can't fix it. I can teach, though. I can educate.
So you have had people open to that education?
Absolutely. Have some really heart-to-heart conversations. Lots of meetings at the schools year after year, lots of meetings and speaking directly to the parents and talking to those parents. Is there some denial? Yeah, there's lots of denial to a degree in these families. And that is why these conversations must continue, because it is our reality and we're not making it up. And therefore you have to know the pain that it causes another's family when your child calls our children out of their name in an intent to attack them and to belittle them and to make them feel like they're inferior for any sort of reason. And that reason is simply just the color of their skin. And we have to continue to have these conversations. And as a mother, I will always be up for the tough conversations because it's important to me, for my own son, and for every other child that follows behind him. That is important. We must make a change once and for all. We have got to define and assess our biases and really step off of the gas on that. We have got to back off in terms of boxing people in because of the color of their skin. There's no reason to continue to do that. My biggest thing is this. If you don't like me, perfectly fine. We don't have to deal with each other. We don't have to be together. You don't have to be in my circle of people. None of those things. But what gives you the right to deny me or think you can deny me because of my skin color?
So important that we have these conversations. And for our viewers, so important that you share this with others. Every person in America should hear what Darlene just said. And I think that the empathy that would be gained for that and the change that could occur would be astronomical if they could just hear and listen to you.
Absolutely.
And what you've just said.
So, we say in this country, that there's one nation under God. And if we are truly one nation under God, then we know that all of his people belong. And we are all one. You say that there's supposed to be justice for all. We want that. All means all. Not a select few, not a certain socioeconomic background. But we are one nation under God. And we need to all be intentional about moving towards what that really means and being a part of the solution. So I'm encouraging everybody, have the conversations, reach out of your scope of network of friends that you talk to. Go beyond that. Talk to your coworkers. Sit at the table with with others who are not on your team or not in the same group with you or don't do the same work that you do.
The other.
Be a part of them.
Yes.
Be surprised what you learn. And that's what the beauty of one nation under God really means.
That's right. It's what made us great.
It's what made us
greater.
Right. Absolutely. Prior to the nation witnessing the murder of George Floyd by the hands of the former Minneapolis police officer, did you believe our concerns about racial profiling, police brutality, and excessive force from other incidents that Black people have been outraged about in the past? If not, why did the murder of George Floyd resonate with you? And I want you to think about this from Trayvon Martin's death in 2012, a murder that was upheld by stand your ground law that supported chasing down a Black male primarily for wearing a hoodie and believed to not belong in the neighborhood guarded by this murderer.
Wow. Well, I do believe the concerns of the African American community are real. They're real. And I have for quite some time. I was involved with teenage Black males in a ministry for many years, really over about the last 10 years. And we would have small group time, open up, and discuss these occurrences. And we did a lot of praying for families that were experiencing these atrocities. So, the thing that was, I guess, most eye-opening to me is that I could look in their eyes and see the fear in these young Black male eyes. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was just heartbreaking. And they had the right, every right, to be fearful because it was happening. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget that video of George Floyd begging for his life and his cries, "I can't breathe." Mm-hmm. I mean, it still is very emotional for me, and I hope it is for the rest of my life. That video, it brought me to my knees, to tears, still does. It was indisputable. Anybody that ever had any question about that type of discrimination, there's no way. It was just indisputable. It's true. And at that point, I knew I had to take a far stronger stand. That silence, no more. Mm-hmm. So I also remember when Trayvon Martin was killed. And it was just, again, I knew it was wrong, what happened to him. And I saw some white people defending that. And it just was wrong. I knew it. That's the way my mother raised me. And that stand your ground law in Florida, I mean, it was just so ridiculous. It's just hard to believe that that could be a law. So I I can't imagine how that law could be passed. And then earlier this year, the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, and how long it took to even make an arrest of those men that literally hunted him down. So, but coming back to George Floyd, I think it took the murder of George Floyd and the widespread video exposure for people to finally wake up and be willing to take a stronger stand. And so I do pray that it's not a moment in time, that it's a movement. The protests, Black Lives Matter, a lot of controversy around Black Lives Matter. But I am all for Black Lives Matter because they do. And those women have made sure that this is not a moment, but a movement. And I support them. And then there's so many other important initiatives. So I stand with my brothers and sisters of color in support of change. And I'm being vocal that we need to change. And by having this show, by sharing it on social media, and sharing a lot of other things, I'm being far more vocal than I've ever been. And I do believe change will come about from these recent events, but it can't happen a minute too soon.
I couldn't agree with you more, Libby. I mean, why are we still here is the question that I ask myself.
I'd love to one day not be having this conversation.
I would one day would like not to have this conversation ever again. I have to be perfectly honest with you. Now is the time for a movement. Once and for all in this country, we have got to get past the ignorance of why race matters. It doesn't matter. Like, that cannot be what defines the human being in a way where it works against them for any reason. We have justice systems. We say they work. Allow them to work, right? Don't find yourself, things such as a George Floyd murder happens because someone has decided that they have the right to take the life of someone else that is believed to be not even worthy of living. You even hear some of the commentary around it. Well, he was a criminal. Oh, well, he had a criminal past. He had a criminal history.
What does that have to do with anything?
He had a $20 fake bill. Well, how do you know that any of this is true at this point? We haven't even allowed the justice system to work, right? And that's where it happens. Are we not innocent until proven guilty? Or does that only apply to some?
To say that someone should lose their life because they were a criminal or because they had a $20 counterfeit bill, how ludicrous
it is.
That?
It's but think about that. That's what people are thinking. Mm-hmm. Well, if he would just listen, or if he didn't run, is that all that? No, we've seen that not work either.
That's right.
Which is why you probably see some of the running and why you see some of, what you think is not adhering to the commands of the police officers at the time of arrest, right? So there are so many things when it comes to our systems that are in place at this time. They may need some tweaking. I don't disagree with that. I don't think that we have. I do think that we have some things in place that are in fact broken,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and also perpetuates the discriminatory acts against certain people and certainly people of color. Again, it's not to be taken into the hands of man. Do your job. Let other systems do their jobs. And then we can all be a part of a world that we say is for all people. That's what we're looking for. All people. And so as we think about how we're going to continue to move forward in this country, we have to know that this conversation doesn't stop here, that the conversations must continue. We have to continue to have them with each other. We have to continue to have them when they make us feel the most uncomfortable or when we think we really don't even understand. You have to be a part of the conversation, and no one can be excluded from the conversation. And the last thing is when people talk about Black Lives Matter and they come back to me with All Lives Matter, you know what my response is? I've been knowing that all lives matter. I've been aware of that. I was raised that way. I've lived my life that way. I know for a fact all lives matter. But what we're saying to you today is that we need you to understand that Black lives are a part of all lives, and they must matter.
Darlene, it has been such a pleasure having this conversation with you. Although hard, it's great that you came, that you shared, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you for being my guest.
Absolutely, Libby. My pleasure. Thank you.
Share the Mic was recorded at E3 Studios in West Homewood, Alabama. Co-production, recording, videography, and editing are by Ronnie Gattry. Share the Mic was created and produced by me, Libby Lassiter, with the help of my many Black and white friends.